Last week, Adobe did their annual Max conference, Adobe Max, where it's kind of like their Mac World or their CES or whatever, where they talk about the newest features in all of their apps. And there were kind of mixed reactions with the update to the Creative Cloud apps. Some people say it was great to see them polishing things. Other folks say it was kind of lackluster. But they add a couple of interesting features, and I'm going to read this blurb here. So they announced a partnership with the news agency Reuters, the largest multimedia news provider. And so they're basically making all of their image content and video content available to view and use through Adobe Stock, including 60 million royalty-free photos, videos, and more, that's kind of a big deal, I think, for Adobe. That's a big deal. They've also added lots of little polishing touches to Photoshop and other Creative Cloud apps. Nothing big and revolutionary like we used to get back in the day. You remember layers showed up, and
right.
Photoshop got a video timeline, and then 3D was thrown in there. Nothing groundbreaking or revolutionary like that. And I want to get your both of your opinions on this. For me, as a Creative Cloud customer, I'm actually okay with that. I don't need revolutionary every single time they rev the app. I'd rather them give me a great app and then just keep polishing it behind the scenes, and maybe every couple of years give me something revolutionary as the creative world zeitgeist, kind of dictates. But don't just give me stuff just to fuel make me feel good about my Creative Cloud subscription.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, that's a lot of times they would just throw in features because they had to have something to release.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were on the actual physical product where they were releasing one every year, they had to do that.
Yeah.
With the Creative Cloud, what they have released a lot of new features over the past year.
Yeah, they trickle them out. It's like an IV drip of features.
And so there's been some really, content-aware crop is really, really great. They've improved stitching for panoramas. There's been a lot of little features that they've added just along the way. And so when they have these big announcements, there's just nothing big to announce.
It's a double-edged sword because they set themselves up for this, right? So they do this big grandiose conference event where people are like, well, if they're spending all this money to do this event, there must be something big coming. And then it's wah, 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 wah.
Right.
So they kind of set themselves up for that. And then the other thing is people, consumers, myself included, we're trained right now to expect big things. All these companies, like even Apple, right? When Apple's under immense pressure to out-innovate themselves every single release. And if they don't, Apple's going down the drain. Oh, this is the post-Steve era. They've lost their way, yada, yada, yada. If they don't, and even if they do make something good, there's trolls that come out of the woodwork that pick it apart and destroy everything all these engineers and people spent untold days and hours away from their families building for us. Right, Martin, what do you think about this whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's obviously if there's not meaty stuff on the table at these big meetings, it does make you wonder why they even have the event. Mm-hmm. But I totally agree with what you're both saying. That they are pushing out relatively meaty features, and they're coming on a steadier pace, and I feel I can totally understand the value of the Creative Cloud, and I'm happy to be a part of that. I've actually since moving, I switched my entire workflow from Lightroom to Capture One a few months ago.
Oh, okay.
And
cool.
since then, I thought, okay, so do I need the Creative Cloud anymore? Mm-hmm. And the answer is still yes. I mean, because Lightroom's only one part of it. I still use Photoshop quite a lot. I use Illustrator. I use InDesign. I use Premiere. I've now started. I record my podcasts in Audition now rather than GarageBand.
Oh,
so
cool.
I've put a few things in that only really works well with Audition, and I've changed the workflow. So I'm using a really big chunk of the Creative Cloud. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't necessarily need. I just want something reliable that gives me the features I want, and I don't really need the feature bloat that the a yearly or a 2-yearly big release sort of schedule brings. So I mean, it seems like a win-win thing. We get the new features as they're available. and we don't have to relearn the program when everything changes, and we don't necessarily have the bloat.
It's so interesting because they have built up this ecosystem around these releases, right? So there's this expectation from the user base that something big is going to come out. It's going to change my workflow and make my life so much easier. I won't know how I was able to live without it. And then there's the educational industry, which is gigantic, billion-dollar industry that's built around these releases as well. So it's not just you waiting on these, it's the lynda.coms and the Kelby trainings and the Creative Lives and the Rocky Nook publishers. All these people want releases to come so they have something new to train you on. If there's nothing new to train you on, there's no reason for them to get more money out of you, right?
Right, but they are still doing the training on these little incremental releases, right? Right. There were a bunch of Lynda titles that came out in March when they released, and again in July when they released, and so it's just, and so it's probably better for them. They don't have to just say, they get a pre-look at it and try to get things in the pipe, but they have a lot of things they got to cover. And this way, they kind of spread it out over the years. So
that's why it gets depressing. I have a whole bookshelf back there that have books in there that I regularly, at least once a quarter, go through and pull out books that are now irrelevant and donate them to the library. Sorry, library, but I donate them to the library. I started doing that. I mean, it was like I don't know, several years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I was like, look at all these books I have laying around the house. I have books everywhere, and then I just spent like a week going through all these books and just make binarily going through the pile, saying relevant, irrelevant, relevant, irrelevant. I ended up with more irrelevant than I had relevant, and I literally had to fill up the car and go to the library and just, hey, here you guys go. All
do
these
I still
books.
need that Adobe 5 book? No.
Exactly. Yeah, the Photoshop Bible. You remember that? Yeah, because these books get out, especially now, especially like you were saying before, Craig, as Adobe drip feeds these features out, it instantly kind of makes the book that you bought before the feature was released somewhat obsolete. Right? Or even as they polish new features, there's a different way to use this particular tool, but your book describes the old way. And but digital, getting online, you could probably find out what's going on a little bit easier.
So I do think they have a challenge because they do drip out these features, though, and don't have a big release for them, is that a lot of people are not aware that they exist.
Yeah.
Right? They were out of town the week it was released, and they get back and they've missed all the talk about it. And I encounter that all the time. I'll show somebody, this is great new feature, and they go, when did that happen? 3 months ago. Right? They just didn't know. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we're in this cloud. All three of us, I think, are in this cloud of updating, and we're always on the latest and greatest and cutting edge, and have the latest thing, and all the time. And it's refreshing when I talk to my friends that aren't on that train. These are the folks that are like, yeah, I'm still on Photoshop 5.5. It works great for me. I don't need anything else. And I'm like, how can you possibly be on that? But they're still creating amazing work. They're perfectly happy. I'm like, how do I downshift away from the constant wave of updates?
You can't go back.
You can't. It's a ratchet, huh? It's a ratchet. Yeah. That's
Once you experience it, you can't go back. Now, they did have some other interesting things in this release. A lot of focus on mobile. Which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, tell us about that. What did they do?
Well, so they released a lot of their apps for Android, which they had all been iOS apps prior to this. So that was kind of a big deal. And they're doing a lot with they have so many mobile apps. I have trouble keeping track of what is what, but Photoshop Fix and Mix, which are for doing like portraits and that sort of thing. And they're doing liquefying, healing, skin smoothing in the new app, right? Some pretty interesting stuff. I don't know that I would use it. Well, I rarely use the mobile apps. It's if I'm traveling and want to do, here's the shot I did today, and I'll just do a quick and dirty to post on Instagram. Most of my editing is going to be back on my, desktop. But they're really powerful tools they're adding to these mobile apps, and I'm sure that would appeal to some people in their workflow.
I wonder if one day we'll get. I wonder. I wonder when the day will come when we get to the full mobile workflow where a desktop is no longer needed. Martin, you think we'll get there at any point?
I think it's possible. I mean, technically, it's obviously possible, but I think I was reading a statement from Apple recently where people are saying, the new MacBook Pros have been announced, and part of the marketing blurb that I was reading about that, or one of the, I think it was maybe Mac Rumors, they were saying that someone in Apple has said, we've got no intention in the near future, like 5 to 10 years, to create one OS that works on both the laptops and on the like iPhone, iPad, things like that.
Yeah.
They're going to keep them separate through necessity and because they don't see the future in bringing them together. But I mean, technically, it's obviously possible. The iPads, my phone is more powerful than my first computer. My phone is more powerful than computers of 5-10 years ago.
Oh yeah, I remember when I was in the military. I was stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base here in California, on the coast. And I remember this was the time during the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. I don't know, the START Treaty. That was when we would invite Russian officials to come tour our military. Excuse me. I think that was the Russians hacking me. That was the time when we would invite the Russians to come in and tour our nuclear capabilities, and they would do the same. Kind of show me yours, I'll show you mine kind of thing. And I remember I was just an airman at the time, and I was tasked to follow them around and take pictures and document what was going on. And I remember the speech that the general would give, and he's like, the technology that we use to launch this ICBM is probably less capable, and you can tell how old this was, is less capable than what's present in a Palm Pilot. Remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, a nuke, a multi or intercontinental ballistic missile with multi-warhead capability launched that could basically end life as we know it, controlled by something as powerful as a Palm Pilot. And you fast forward to today, we have many times that in every device we have in our pockets, right?
Right. My watch has more power than the.
You could wage global thermonuclear war with your Apple Watch, Craig.
Would you like to play a game?
No, I don't want to play that game at all.